Roundtable discussion right away, and Ghana is 68 years. The question we're asking this morning is that have we fulfilled the dreams of our founding fathers? Is a special post-independence day discussion where we get to reflect on the dreams and aspirations of our founding fathers and assess how far we've come as a nation. Have we truly achieved the economic and political independence envisioned by Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah? What would our founding fathers say about Ghana today? And more importantly, what must we do moving forward? This morning, I have in studio with me the Honorable Fritz Bafo, who is a Ghanaian journalist, a politician. Okay, so we have in studio with us Uncle Fritz, if he prefers that, who is a Ghanaian journalist, politician, communications consultant. He was the member of parliament for Ablekuma South constituency in the Parliament of Ghana and the Minister of Information during the Mills administration. This morning, he's in studio with me to have this conversation. Uncle Fritz, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm quite well, and how are you too?
Yeah, well, I'm doing very well by God's grace. How did you celebrate the Independence Day yesterday?
Very quietly.
Tell us about it.
No, just quietly. I mean, it's a time for reminiscing and reflection, so, it was okay.
Right, right, great. Now, growing up, I grew up in Ablekuma South constituency, and so we knew Uncle Fritz as the big man that when we were very young, we used to see you in the constituency sometimes. I just live across your street, actually. Yeah, so I see you a lot of times, and we've always admired you.
Thank you.
You've worked hard.
Thank you.
Great. Well, before we dive into the conversation, let's reflect on some of the powerful words of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah on the night on the night Ghana gained independence in 1957. And these are some excerpts. It says that at long last, the battle has ended. And thus, Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. And he also said that we're going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, that we are prepared to lay our foundation, our own African personality. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of Africa. Now, these words carried great hope and ambition. But 68 years later, how much of this vision have we fulfilled? And that is a big question we are tackling this morning. Uncle Fritz, when you hear these words by Kwame Nkrumah today, what comes to mind?
They're very stirring words. They're words that indicate and guide us to the direction we should be going. And I think that we have to be very careful because time is long, things do not happen instantaneously. There's so many factors that influence the affairs of men. And so we have to take that into consideration. But the most important thing is a nation. We should have a certain sense of focus. And that in itself sometimes gives problems because we also lose focus because of external and internal influences. And so it's about the focus that is important if we're going to achieve the visions of the people who founded this country and the people before them who knew there was a nation in the making. You see? So basically that is that for me. Very, very stirring words. And anytime you need reassurance and you need a confidence booster, you listen to those words and you read the words of the founding fathers of this country. You look at their history, their struggles, their trials and tribulations and all that. And it gives you the strength to say, oh, if they suffered, I can also suffer, but I'll carry on.
Right.
And that's what's important. Yeah.
That's what's important. Now, what were the key visions outlined or the key pillars of this vision for Ghana?
Well, the thing is, I think with our founding fathers, they knew that to put a nation together, we had to be united. We come from disparate, traditional ordinances. I don't say ethnic groups because we are very intertwined in this little country of ours, intertwined in terms of family ties, bloodlines, and all kinds of social integration, aspects of social integration. So we had to unite and have a certain focus on what we wanted this country to be like. And I think that the vision was for a country, and it's embellished in the that we say freedom and justice is the essence of our country, and freedom entails quite a lot, and then justice is also very, very important. So a country where people will live in peace, in justice, with a certain unity of purpose, and to do that, you've got to make sure that the health of your citizens are to the fore, the education of your citizens are to the fore, freedom of movement, freedom of assembly, where people are free and they can do things, and then also aspire to the highest of heights of human endeavor. This is what is very important. And I think that was what our forefathers, led by Kwame Nkrumah at the time, wanted for Ghana. And I think that we're working towards it. It's going to be a very, very difficult proposition. It's not going to be easy at all. Most Ghanaians are impatient and they think a nation at 68 is an old nation. It isn't. The United Kingdom, which colonized us at a certain time, all right? I think it was in 1066 that William the Conqueror conquered Britain and started the line of what is the sovereignty of Britain, the monarchy and everything. So it's lasted from all that time. And think of the trials and tribulations that country has gone through. All right. We look at Italy. Italy, with Garibaldi and the monarchy in the 19th century, went through hell. China has been there for thousands of years, Japan also. And so it's a journey, but it's a journey where you're focused that you want to arrive at a certain destination. I don't think as a nation you'll arrive at that destination, because America is now going through changes in itself. And it was in 1776 that the Union came into being. So these are things that we have to consider as historians, but it shouldn't slow us down. It should give us a certain sense of purpose that we can do it, that all is not lost, especially when we find out that we're in a state where we feel very disillusioned. Okay, and over the 68 years, there have been great periods of disillusionment and dissatisfaction and frustration. So we shouldn't consider those as a an end all to everything. We should know that at least there's more to come.
There's more to come. Right. So essentially, you believe that we've been in resistance for some time, but we should relax. We should take it easy on ourselves, but not.
I'm not saying take it easy on ourselves, but we should be aware that we haven't arrived anywhere. It's like you're going on a journey from Accra to Kumasi, all right, and it's one you find out you've got a stone in your shoe. You're walking. And so you stop and you take the stone and you say, can I go on? But it doesn't mean that the journey has ended.
Right.
You understand? If you throw the stone away and you treat your foot, if there's a sore, you continue. Okay, so that is the analogy I'm trying to give. Yeah.
And that gives a lot of hope.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I've always been very optimistic about Ghana. Yeah.
You're still optimistic?
Very, very, very much so.
Wow. Because a lot of the young people have some way, somehow giving up on the nation to an extent.
It's to be understood. I mean, we also have to look at the indices that lead to these kind of problems that we have. All right. Let's say 40, 50 years ago, most Ghanaians lived in the rural areas. If I venture to put some numbers to it, I think 70%, 60 and 70% lived in the rural areas, and 30% lived in the cities. You understand?
Yeah.
Now it's the other way around. We've got about 55% living in the cities and 45% living in the rural areas. And Ghana is an agrarian nation. So if you've lost that huge resource base, naturally you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
And then the people coming to the cities from an agrarian system, they're now coming into a formal system. How do you Where do you house them? Where do you look after them? Because they're coming into a more enclosed environment. All right.
Yeah.
So we have to look at that. And we've got the youth. And when we talk about the youth, we're talking about 80% of Ghanaians.
Yeah.
All right. And the policies of the past have not looked at that situation, that scenario. That we're going to come into a situation where we're going to have a huge urban population. The infrastructure does not meet up with the population explosion and all that. So these are the things that we've got to consider.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now let's come back to when you started speaking about the visions of our forefathers.
Yeah.
Now you spoke about freedom, you spoke about justice and all of that. 68 years later, do you think that we've been able to realize these things?
Not at all. We are tweaking the institutions. You know, we're getting to situations which you've never seen before. All right. In 1966, there was a coup. All right. Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown. And so we had a restart. All right. Because the group that overthrew Kwame Nkrumah were not people who are aligned to his vision. All right. They wanted a country too. They wanted a nation too. But they had a different tack to how they were going to achieve that. They didn't last. By 1972, they had been overthrown. And then the military came in the second time. And we had General Ignatius Ochampong, who was a soldier and so had a certain knowledge of what a country should be because he had sworn to uphold the nation's integrity and all that kind of thing. And he stayed from 1972 to 1978, I think. By 1979, the military government had been overthrown through a mutiny. And then we had the Second Republic. The Third Republic. And that didn't last. And then we had the PNDC, and they also started tweaking with institutions and looking at how to make the country, put the country on a steady path. All right? And by 1992, we had the Fourth Republic. And we've been in the democratic dispensation for the first time for over a decade, more than a decade. Now it's 1992, we're 33 years with a democratic dispensation. But certain occurrences have happened to make us aware of what scenarios could arise. All right? Yeah. When the NDC won the election in 1992, the main opposition decided that they would boycott the parliamentary election.
Yeah.
That in itself was, you raise the flag. Okay? And then in 1996, when we had the second election, the insistence of the opposition to the NDC, the MPP, to change the way we did our elections, pictures were brought on board, IDs were brought on board and everything. These things had to come into place. They were necessary, all right, for the progress of our democratic dispensation. Then in 2000, we had the first time that an opposition party had taken over power, all right? And even that, you realize that changeover was like a coup, all right? We've taken over power. The people before us were no good. Let's try as much as possible to make sure that they never come back to power. That is not the essence of democracy. But it's something that has got to be learned. So in 2004, we had another election. The opposition party that had won, the MPP, retained power. All right? The arguments about whether they cheated or they hadn't cheated and all that kind of thing, that is also part of the democratic process, the learning curve. All right? In 2008, the NDC, we're talking about two main political parties now, but I'll talk about the minor parties later. They won power very narrowly. For the second time, we went to a second round, and we'd gone to the first round in 2000 when Atta Mills was defeated by Kufuor. We'd never gone to a second round before. I mean,
The runoff.
the runoff. But we had a runoff. Yes, I think in the third republic. But
Okay.
you're right.
That's
I mean,
right.
but I'm just telling you about these high points or flashpoints.
Yeah.
And so in 2008, we ended up in Tain to determine who was going to be the president and the parliament and all that kind of thing. And so that was another flashpoint. And then we had a very narrow majority for the ruling government at the time from 2008. And then in 2000, and then we lost our president in 2012. It had never happened.
Right.
So these things happen. And then they become a learning curve for us. You understand?
Yeah.
Because you can't anticipate them. You don't presume that, oh, we're going to vote for Tamils, but we expect that in 2012 he will die and then we'll know what to do. You can't do that.
No.
So we had, John Mahama was the vice president, then became the president of Ghana, unelected at the time.
Yeah.
That in itself was another departure from the norm.
Right.
All right. Then he went and stood, very narrowly won. All right. And then we had the situation where we had this long court case, another thing that was a departure from the norm. And these things, you can't presume that they wouldn't have happened. You understand?
Yeah.
They had to happen because of who we are, what we are, and where we are. You understand?
Yeah.
So then in 2016, the NDC lost. And for the second time, there was another transition from the government, the incumbent, to a new government.
New government.
Again, a different scenario. Again, we haven't really learned how to have transitions that are beneficial to most of the people in Ghana.
How do you mean?
Yeah, MPP comes into power and they say, all right, all NDC people who are in certain positions should go home. You understand? And whether you're good or whether you're not, you're lumped in and you're gone. All right? And that in itself is a learning curve. Are we going to learn that? I mean, I hope and pray that we learn that, and I'll talk about that later on. Then in 2020, the same thing happened. The MPP won again. NDC took them to court. It was it didn't happen. Nothing happened, and the government continued. Then in 2024, we had this election that's just about 2-3 months ago. And there was a changeover in government. And this time, it was a massive victory for the other side, which was the NDC. And again, unprecedented, a departure from the norm that we know. How do we handle it? And I can see that, though it's early days yet, both sides are finding it very difficult to handle the success and the failure. All right? And we're seeing that. That's a learning curve. And it's important then for the experts, all right, and the specialists in history and sociology and anthropology to look at these things and to do the research and to say, how do we avoid some of the negatives that arise from these flashpoints that are a departure from the norm? All right? A president dies, a new president comes in, you know, what was the transition, a smooth one? You know, these are the things that we've got to discuss. But I think that most of the time when we have political discussions, we discuss personalities. You see what I mean? And it's like just discussing the symptoms without looking at the actual disease. And that is a problem for me. But I think that is a process that we will have to come to terms with.
What is the actual disease?
The actual disease is that I don't think that we are thorough. All right? I don't think that we are thorough when we are analyzing. We tend to be a little bit emotive. We put a lot of emotion into our analysis, and it makes it very, very difficult to come out with empirical solutions to some of the things that we do. But again, as somebody who's a history buff, again, it's a departure from the norm. But these are things that we've got to look at. All right.
Yeah.
As a media man, I see the work that we do, and I feel that we've got to be a little bit more intense. You understand?
Yeah.
We have to also look and diagnose our problems in a far better way.
All right. Well, 9:06, and this is Business Breakfast on Z101.9 FM with me, Nitra Bihamon. This morning, I am talking to Uncle Fritz Buffo, who is a veteran journalist. He's a politician and communications consultant. He was a member of parliament for Ablekuma South constituency and the Minister of Information during the Mills administration. And this morning, we're having a conversation on our independence. We are 68 years as a nation. How far have we come? Have we fulfilled the vision of our forefathers? And that is the conversation we're having this morning. You can join the conversation on WhatsApp at 0544-321019, 0544-321019. You can send your questions, comments, and we'll do well to address them accordingly. You can as well engage us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at ZFMGH. Instagram, Facebook, and X at ZFMGH. All right, Uncle Fritz, let's move on. Now, you mentioned that we haven't really achieved the things that these our forefathers envisioned, even though we've made some progress. There was a bit of political independence in their vision, and also economic independence.
Right.
Do you think we've achieved any of these?
To a certain extent, yes, but with political independence and economic independence. There was a proviso, and that one was Africa was united. All right, which was something that Nkrumah was pushing for.
Yeah.
Because he realized, and as he said, the independence of Ghana would be meaningless unless it was linked to the total liberation of Africa. It's a reality. If we don't unite and we don't come together in Africa, we're just going to keep on having the political and economic shocks that we're having. Because virtually we're the same people. I'll even talk about the sub-regions, which is what I know because I've been to almost every country in the sub-region and engaged people. And so when you have political shocks and you're not protected by the unity of your neighbors, then you're in problems. Look at Ukraine right now. Look at how the rest of Europe is rallying around Ukraine, despite the fact that the biggest donor to Ukraine in terms of arms and support of the United States has started saying we're withdrawing. That in itself is a shock. And it could happen to us in Ghana if you're on your own. So if you're united and you have a certain sense of purpose, then fine. We're talking about economics, all right?
Yeah.
I spent some time in the Republic of Benin. I was filming a decade or two, let's say 2 decades ago. And I woke up in the morning in the northern part of Benin. And I woke up in the morning and I went out for a walk. And I just felt I was still in Ghana. It wasn't as if I was in a different country. The people looked like me. They wore clothes that were not strange to me. The way they were eating, what they were eating and all that, to a certain degree, was very much mine. I was saying, but why? Because when I was going from Ghana to Benin, I went by car.
Right.
And I was going to the northern part of Benin. And it took me about 10 hours, 10, 12 hours. A journey which should have taken me about 6 hours. Because I was stopped by my fellow Africans. I was interrogated, and my traveling was impeded. And I went with an American from USAID. They were the ones who financed the film. And they got there about 4 or 5 hours before I did. Because they were Europeans and Americans or Caucasians or from another country out of Africa, they had freer movement. Now, Lagos is only some 320 miles from Accra. Try crossing the border and going to Lagos. It will take you 3 or 4 times the time that you can actually get there, the real time. All right. We look at ourselves with distrust, despite the fact that we're the same people. And in most cases, when you look at our history, we have the same heritage.
Yeah.
So these are things that we've got to deal with. Because if we come together, we'll come together with a better understanding of ourselves, and we can protect ourselves. You know the old Ghanaian adage about the boomstick and the broom itself, and all that. So these are the things that we've got to take in. And Nkrumah was a visionary. He knew that Africa had to unite in order for us to achieve what the USSR, USA, United Kingdom, and it's funny, even if we use the words. Russia was the union of Soviet Socialist republics. Britain was the United Kingdom. America is the United States of America.
Right.
So you can see that there's a value in the word united.
Right.
And we can do the same. So Nkrumah was aware, and naturally he had sources of inspiration and influence from people like W.E.B. Du Bois, the African-American philosopher and sociologist, Marcus Garvey, Washington Carver, all those people outside, but they were people of color. And they realized the importance, because we'd gone through an incredible decimation of our psyche and our personality with the slave trade, all right, which affected not only the people who were taken across, but the people who were left behind. You understand? And so we have horrors in our history that we've got to deal with, all right? And these things affect us. But because we've not been taught, or we're not aware of the potency of that negativity of the slave trade and what it did to us, we tend to forget about it and think that everything is all right. It's like a man who is sick but doesn't know he's sick. That's the thing. So these are things that we've got to consider, and that's the angle in which usually I talk about our independence and things like that. And I look at Kwame Nkrumah, and I knew Kwame Nkrumah. I met Kwame Nkrumah. I was very fortunate to have a father who was very close to Kwame Nkrumah and was part and parcel of Kwame Nkrumah's dream. Because in the end, he became the vice chancellor of the Kwame Nkrumah University. And one of the dreams of Kwame Nkrumah was that we're going to have massive industrialization. And the managers of the industrial development agenda were going to come from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, in terms of the engineers, the agriculturists, the experts, And in the end, when Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown and these people came out into the public sphere, a lot of them left the country and went and helped other African countries to develop. You understand? So I'm just saying that, the vision of Kwame Nkrumah is upheld. And I'm not saying that the people who were through Kwame Nkrumah didn't have a vision. I'm not from that kind of dispensation at all. In fact, I'm directly opposite the Buzia Danko tradition and what have you. But when Kofi Abrefa Buzia came into power, he recognized the importance of rural development. And they pushed for a rural development agenda, all right, which became something that we learned. And so we included it in our terms of reference for development in the country. So I'm not going to throw away the baby with the bathwater, all right? We talk about Ignatius Kutu Ajampong, and you realize that he did a lot, because the national pledge became something to help unify us. You live in Dansuman, and Dansuman itself, as you see it now, it's one of the largest social housing projects in Africa. All right. The Pong Dam and all that. He was interested in development and all that. But there were certain aspects maybe of his governance that people didn't see, and then in a rush to the head, we did things that we shouldn't have done. My mentor and friend, Jerry Rawlings, came to power. Naturally, he came in, and there were certain decisions that he had to take that were unfortunate. But he also brought a certain a certain aspect of citizenry and citizenship awareness
yeah.
of the country, that nobody was useless and that everybody should participate in the governance process. I'm not saying these things weren't happening, but the awareness became more defined.
Right.
You see, because let me tell you a little bit of our history. In the First World War, which is from 1914 to I think 1917, 1918, the British took, who were then, Ghana was Gold Coast was a colony. They took quite a sizable number of our citizens at the time to fight on their behalf.
Yeah.
Some of them were taken outside, but they had to educate some people from the rural areas, because in order for you to use a gun, you have to have some semblance of rudimentary education. And then after the war, these people went back home, but they had a certain awareness. This was the closest they'd come to the white man in a different situation. So they realized that obia and obia, and so they started making sure that modern formal education was an important thing from their point of view. All right? And you could see that there was a certain movement between 1919 all the way to 1939, where we had book clubs and social organizations geared to knowledge, acquisition of knowledge and everything. And that came about because these people had seen something. And then it became more nuanced after the Second World War from 1939 to 1945. So you had the situation where on the 28th of February you had that incident that led to the acceleration of the fight for independence, you see.
Yeah.
And it's all about citizenship awareness.
Okay.
They become aware that they have certain powers that they're not using.
Right.
All right? And Kwame Nkrumah's strength was that when he came in as the General Secretary of the UGCC, he realized that they hadn't really touched the youth in the rural areas. And at that time, the majority of Ghanaians lived in the rural areas. So Kwame Nkrumah went around the rural areas. And it was the youth who changed the paradigm, you know, in Ghana. They brought down the voting age through their work and activism. The constitution was changed, where in the old days, if you hadn't paid your rates, you couldn't vote. And we had universal adult suffrage and all that. So these are processes. And I think that is what we should be teaching in our schools, so that people know who they are. So when Jerry Rawlings came into power and insisted that every citizen should be a participant in their journey of destiny, which were done in different degrees, he took it further. And so the constitution that we have now was put together by the people, every aspect of every vocation in Ghana. Okay? So these things are very, very important. I say it's a question of us looking at it and saying that we're on a journey, and there has to be a certain seriousness, all right, in our passage. I think we play a bit. We think, some people think they are there already. So we do all kinds of foolish things, you see. And that's what worries me. But I know that it's part and parcel of the evolution of the Ghanaian state. But I think that one thing that will help us is if we unite properly, where ECOWAS, which was supposed to be a foundation, should have gone further than that by now. Yeah. And the external influences are there too. That one, I'll come to that later.
Wow, very interesting. I mean, I like the way you're taking us back and you're building the story. And so from what you just shared, we've seen that every single thing is a contribution to where we are headed. And that also gives me a sense of hope that, okay, indeed, every little thing that we're going through now is working together for our good. I mean, if we want to put it in the Christian context. Now, let's talk about industrialization a bit.
Yeah.
But just before that, so which areas do you think Ghana has fallen short in?
I believe that we've played around too much with our educational system. We've played around, we've politicized our educational system, and it's hurt us, because where it started was not where it was just meant to be. All right. When I was growing up, you did your common entrance, 11, 12, 13, 14. I went at 11. I went to a boarding school. I went to Premier College, and it was an experience. And you realize that the education was very much paramount in the eyes of the government system. So we built more secondary schools. We encouraged people to go to secondary schools. We encouraged people to go to university. But when I lived on the KNUST campus, as a child of the Vice Chancellor, I saw the lifestyle of the students. All right, at that time, Tech had about 1,500, 2,000 students at maximum. They all had rooms in themselves. All right. They were actually paid to go to university. They were given allowances. All right. They had 5 meals a day of different, they were looked after. All right. They had some form of entitlement because they had to be held up very high because of what they were going to do. But that in itself should have been a progression, that we can't afford to look after 1,200 people. All right. We know that the population is burgeoning. So therefore, we're going to need maybe 5,000 students in the university, maybe 10,000 students, and that should be the maximum, because then we can control it and we can see how we're going to do it. Right now, Tech has about 76,000 students. All right. How many lecturers? Now we have hostels all over the place. All right. So we've lost a bit of control over the system in making sure, because I know that now a lot of lecturers don't even know their students.
That's true.
All right. You go to school, and I at a certain time I went to school in Britain. I did my tertiary in Britain. And the most important aspect of that was the tutor. He sort of helped you. You went to him when you were disturbed, when you were failing in your academic studies, when you had problems, and they had the experience to help you. And I must admit, and I'd like to say, a word to my tutor, Dr. Hiddings, who was my English lecturer, who helped me through the period, the leaves of blessed memory. May he rest in peace. But that is another aspect. So secondary schools. And secondary schools were good laboratories for what we wanted to do in Ghana. So we had a certain sense of pride. And they instituted things like the intercollegiate football, athletics, and everything. So there was competition, there was teamwork, Premier College would like to make sure that we would beat Infantswim, but not because we hate Infantswim. But it helped us know that we've got to aspire. All right? It happens. Now we've got a very, very good competition in the Science and Maths quiz. And it's from a guy who was from the system, Kwesi Mensah-Bonsu. Great guy. So he saw this thing and said, and it's sort of ratcheted up this thing about I belong to this school. And all that, but it's alone. It's a standalone competition now. But in those days, it was football, athletics, table tennis, hockey, and Ghana was doing well on the international scene. You understand? So I think that we haven't dealt well with our educational system. We've tampered around with it too much. Then, also, we have to look at our curriculum. All right? Is history being taught? And we have to have the right. We've got a historical society of Ghana. By now, the Ministry of Education should have engaged them and said, look, we want a complete history of Ghana, devoid of the political nuances. All right? Because most of our history books have got various aspects of politics. I mean, if you like Nkrumah, then you could look at Bua. If you didn't like Nkrumah, you look at Edubain and Michael Quay. And no, that shouldn't be it at all. And then we should also look at our history, at the impact, the social impact it made on us. All right? Why did the white man come here? We're not even talking about the slave trade. We're not even talking about the impact it had on us. It impact it had on our own institutions. You understand? Why do we have migrations? You understand?
Yeah.
So somebody will get up and say, oh, Volta region, all Evers. And people will say, no, they were not all Evers. And the Evers will say, oh, we also have different groups, and this is how we are united, and all that. Those kind of things have got to be taught to give us a certain self of being. As I'm sitting here, I know I come from about 5-6 different areas in Ghana directly, and I have access to it. And I always say it everywhere I go. You know, when you look at the word Ashanti, it's Asa Inti. We came together because of war.
Yeah.
Who came together? Who were they? How did they come together? How did they bond? You understand? You look at the Fanti, they say, hey, Fanti. Is it true? All right? Now, a few months ago, I had an archaeologist in the studio when I was working. And he told us about the fact that there were human settlements in this country as far back as 10,000 years ago. Do the Ghanaians know that?
I don't
know. Do they know that the Kobibrim forest the gold was being mined, refined, and all that? All these things are very important to us, but we're not doing it. All right? We've been influenced so much by the West. And so the kind of educational system that we put into place has now created people who want to cross the desert or cross the waters to go to Europe. All right? I know of people who are very well educated who are now stuck in jobs in America looking after older people and things like that. You know? And in my hope and optimism is that we've got to create an environment in this country that will give our children or the youth a choice to say, okay, I can either stay in Ghana or go away. But if you give them no choice to say that there's no hope in this country, we've got to go, then it's a problem. You understand? Now, we've had a change of government. And as a former politician, I'm getting calls. Oh, can you help my child into this place now that you empower and all that kind of thing? And it's sad. Because it should be a situation where that a change of government shouldn't impact on employment opportunities.
Yeah.
All right. We should make sure that we're creating avenues where it shouldn't be a political choice for you to be employed. You understand?
Yeah.
These are the things that I worry about. Now, when we come to industrialization, I think that most of the industries started by Kwame Nkrumah were supposed to be pilot industries that we should have grown. But we didn't. Because when he was overthrown, people didn't believe in his economic policies. And so they said, let's diverge and all that. But we have experts. We have people in universities who have done research, analysis, and without the emotion, we could come up with our own solutions to the problems that we meet.
We fail to do all of that.
Yeah.
But can Ghana truly break free from?
Oh yes, I think so. Let me tell you something. I'm very sorry to say this. I try to take politics out of conversations like this one, but on the 6th of December, I sat on my bed. And I was a little sad. I was even scared.
Why?
I said, if this election doesn't go the way I want it to go, I can't see this country. You know, I mean, I had this tiny flicker of despair. By the 9th, I realized that the Ghanaian, the man walking on the street, he knows what he wants. All right? I'm not saying that because they voted for the NDC. But they had taken a decision that what pertained before wasn't to their satisfaction, so they were going to make a change. So, I mean, I've never underrated the man on the street, but sometimes you have small doubts.
Yeah.
So it means that political parties have got to look at the man on the street as the engine of their existence and cater to them in a very honest, direct, and important manner. Other than that, all right, we'll have problems.
Yeah.
So my hope is that the man on the street, and the Ghanaian has always saved himself. When we had the situation where the Ghanaians went into Nigeria and then they were kicked out, and everybody thought that the country would explode, these people just seamlessly moved back into the system and started doing things. So Ghanaians have a propensity for doing great things, and that should be harnessed.
Uncle Fritz, I'm enjoying this conversation. But 31 after 9, and this is Business Breakfast on Z101.9 FM with me, Nichobi Hammond. This morning I'm speaking to Uncle Fritz Bafo, a former, he's a Ghanaian former, he's a veteran journalist and a politician and also a communications consultant. He was a member of parliament for Ablikma South constituency and the Minister for Information during the Mills administration. And this morning we're talking about whether we've been able to achieve the dreams of our forefathers 68 years on. And he's made a lot of very salient points. Very major issue he's talked about is our education system. And he says that we've not really been able to evolve over the period. We're still stuck to certain old ways of doing certain things. But if you want to engage us in a conversation, please send us a text on 054432 1019 054432 1019 or engage us on our social media platforms at ZFMGH on Instagram, Facebook, and X. And let's read your comments and answer your questions accordingly. Uncle Fred's, Ghana's economy was once described as very promising. Yet still we face issues like debt, inflation, and unemployment.
Yeah.
What went wrong?
Well, despite all my gung-ho optimism, I think we've mismanaged our resources, and I think that's the problem of Africa. We've been taught to mismanage our resources.
Who taught us?
The people who colonized us.
How?
Why did they colonize us? You know, they didn't colonize us because of some love for Africa and the fact that they wanted to convert us to Christianity and all that. They came here to exploit our resources. You understand? Our human resource base, our natural resource base, and everything. You know, they took our gold, they took our manganese, and they put in place a certain system that had to be, if it was going to benefit us, had to radically change. We had to radically change that system. And I think we were a little too gradual with it. All right?
Yeah.
We found oil, but are we getting the maximum benefit from the oil that we're producing? No. Because with the template was the colonial template. All right? I'll give you an example. We're seeing it now, and it just shows you Donald Trump has told the Ukrainians, if you want aid, all right, or you want us to give you support, all right, you have to sign off your resources to us. Okay? Now, Britain, all right, and if you look at the history of our gold, you'll realize that we did not get the maximum benefits from our gold. And so we've got to change that. So if we manage our resources properly, and Ghana is a very wealthy country, and this one, I will actually support the Nado in when he said, because it's true. We have the resources. We have lithium, we have manganese, we have chromium, we have bauxite, we have gold, we have diamonds. All right, our diamonds are more like industrial diamonds, but have we exploited it properly? Diamonds are used for cutting. Have we got a tool making industry in this country? Have we got iron and steel industry? When we have iron in Ghana. Aluminium, have we really used Valco properly to benefit us and all those kind of things? Are we using the Volta Lake as a means of transport to bring things from the north to the south and the south to the north? All right, where are railway lines network? My father was one of the first African senior railway superintendents when he came out of with his degree.
Wow.
All right, my uncle, Dr. GKB de Grove Johnson, was the general manager of Ghana Railways. He even worked in Nigeria. They sent Ghanaians. They run Nigeria Railways at a certain time.
Wow.
Now, the railway network, where is it? All right. And so now we use huge trucks to bring in the material from the areas of exploitation to the ports. Roads are very expensive to maintain and all that kind of thing. So where's our railway network? When I finished secondary school in 1968, I remember taking the train from Kumasi to Accra with a whole load of the guys who finished school. Yeah, that was the means of moving the network. But I have to tell you that the railway network was actually linked to all the areas where you could exploit our resources. And we didn't improve upon it. All right? Now, Indian Railways is one of the most formidable railway networks in the world. And in terms of passenger transport and everything, it's very successful. Why? Because the British at the time, when they set up the Indian Railways, was to transport troops, because of the way India was big, to transport their troops to areas where they were needed. So they had passenger railways. You see what I mean? But in our case, ours was mainly for freight. You understand? Yeah. But then we sort of transformed it into passengers too. But in those days, it was to take the bauxite, from Takwa to Takrady, from Obuasi, all those cocoa and all that. That was part and parcel of it. To take our things to Takrady, which was the port. And the Takrady port was built because the surf port system, which we had, where they used the canoes to take goods to the ships that were outside in the sea. We used surf ports. So the Jamestown port was actually a surf port. The ships didn't berth. They anchored off the shore, and we took the canoes to either bring people and all that kind of thing. It was inefficient. So Gettysburg decided that we'll build a deep sea port. And Ghana, because of the lay of our coastline, we don't have natural ports. So they built the Sekeni Takrady port. And then when Nkrumah came in, though there were plans for a second port, that was Tema. All right? They were looking at Adan and they realized that it wasn't maybe suitable. So they built the Tema port. And these are what we call artificial deep sea ports. You understand? Yeah. So I'm just talking to you about the resources. So when we took over, we should have just had a radical paradigm shift as to how we're going to manage our resources. I think we were a little slow there. Yeah. But you see, human endeavor, you can't quantify it. People are going to see and say, look, we did it the wrong way. Let's do it the right way. How do we solve it? And we'll have to sit down and do it together. And that brings me to another point. We really have to sit together. Ghanaians really have to sit together. I was very sad when they said they were having the National Economic Dialogue and one group said, no, we're not taking part. I think that is wrong. We need each other badly. When I was in Parliament, I mean, my best friends were from the other side. I learned a lot of them from them on the other side. And I think it's the same thing now in Parliament. Privately, most of the guys get on together and they sit down and they enjoy each other's company. Why can't they do it together officially so that we can turn this country around?
Yeah. But Uncle Fred, apart from the division, now I was going to ask you what is actually the problem, why we are facing all of these things, because I mean the narrative that it is so come the why are we still going through that? And I know one of the issues was the political divisions that you just mentioned. What other issues are there?
Well, we really have to know who we are. We have not delved into our heritage. You understand? We're using the yardstick that was imposed upon us by the Europeans and the narrative they brought in. You understand?
Yeah.
Where you say, oh, this man is from this side, so we don't get on. We've got a problem in Boku. We shouldn't have a problem in Boku. The people there are the same kind of people. I mean, I know it happens elsewhere in the world, but in our case, we can do something about it. We can actually thrash out that case, you know. And these divisions sometimes magnify into what we're doing to ourselves now. All right?
Yeah.
And there's the human error and the human side of things. I'm not saying there's a lot of greed in the country, and it's created by the economic situation that we've put ourselves in, that certain people then become greedy, they become selfish, they want everything for themselves. And when they say they even want everything for themselves, is they want security. And they believe that that's the best way to have financial and social security, because you don't have an effective social security system in the country. If we had an efficient social security system in the country, people won't harass parliamentarians and people of influence for financial assistance and things like that. If we had an effective educational system, how we're looked and we're paying for our students, and you know, then we'll be all right. So I'm just saying that, yeah, the human element is there, the greed, the selfishness, and all that. But I know very well. I cannot be an idealist. I cannot say that Ghana will be a paradise. We'll always have problems.
Yeah.
Every country in the world has problems, and we have to deal with the problems. But at least we have to have a core where Ghanaians feel comfortable about living in their own country and being part of the process.
Right. Uncle Fritz, what lessons can we learn from other African countries that have made some economic progress?
I think that, one of my favorite countries is Nigeria. And Nigeria has its problems. But Nigerians have a certain confidence when they are embarking on any endeavor that we lack. We tend to be laid back about it. I think we should be more forceful. We should also find a way of getting together to look at how we can manage and maximize our resources to benefit us. You understand?
Yeah.
I believe that we should also unite. We should learn more about our heritage, who we are. All right? We should look at our culture not as a sideline, but as an important part of our developmental process. You know?
Yeah.
I know when you sit with a lot of Ghanaians, they talk to you about, oh, I traveled here and it was fantastic and everything. But one country which actually impressed me to no end was Japan. They have almost the same traditional religions as we have. They believe in nature worship. You understand?
Yeah.
The core of our religious tradition is nature worship. But it hasn't brought them back. They still apply science to it. They still work together. You know, they come up with solutions to their problems. Science and technology is not something they are afraid of, but their culture is there. Their culture is there because culture is the essence of who you are and what you can do. And when we're talking about the Black Stars in the great old days and we used to shout, it was about Ghana. Yes, they are Ghanaians and we are the best. And it comes from that culture. You that were a special people. You have to believe that you're a special people. Not a special people to look down on other people, but in order to contribute to the society and to the well-being of the universe.
I see. Very. we have very limited time, and we have to move on. But I want us to talk about leadership, and I was speaking about economic. We've spoken about we've spoken about industrialization. We've also touched a bit on Kwame Nkrumah's vision. Let's talk about leadership a bit. Uncle Fritz, looking at Ghana's leadership from independence till now, do you think that we've had, visionary leadership?
Yeah, to a certain extent, we've had visionary leadership. It's how you take the visions of our leaders and you promote them into something that is fruitful. Okay. What I want to say is that, yes, we've had leaders who have not been good. And I won't mention names. But the system also encourages that to a certain degree.
Uncle Fritz, let me take you back a bit. When you say they've not been good, what do you mean?
They've not delivered. You see, if you haven't got a sense of humility, and you haven't got a sense of seriousness, and you haven't got a sense of belief in your people, you know what I mean, and you want to do the best for your people, then you're not a good leader. You really have to also reflect, all right, the aspirations of your people. If the people vote for you because they think that you can deliver and you don't deliver, you're a bad leader. You understand what I'm saying? It's very important. And if the system was good and you are even defeated, it's because they'll say that you've done enough, but you haven't done enough. You understand? They'll vote you out. But they won't vote you out with calumny, all right, with some kind of hatred or disdain. You understand? You'll still be respected, you know. I think that we've got to do more about training our leaders, you know.
Whose responsibility is it?
Oh, it is the collective, the national collective, all right. I mean, we've got a House of Chiefs. We've got families, you know. We've got families we really have to start looking and saying, what is it that we want out of our leaders? Look at, I'll just give you an example, the monarchy in Britain. It wasn't always like this, all right? You had kings and queens who were, you know, extravagant, wicked, cruel, but the system changes it. You don't understand. You can't do that. When Princess Diana died, the English monarchy had to change and open up a little bit more because the people said, no, there was something wrong when this woman died and the way she was treated and all that kind of thing. So it just shows you that there is an evolution of the kind of leadership that we want. We're looking at now, let me give you an example. I said I didn't want to mention names. But look at Albert Magbin. He came into parliament, he said, look, we're Ghanaian people. All right, so he starts wearing traditional attire. Nobody's complaining. People even are energized by it.
Right.
You understand? Yeah. A small gesture like that can change things. You understand? So it's very, very important. Yesterday, for example, we just decided that we're going to depart from marching in the sun, children marching in the sun and everything. There are so many opinions about that. I've got people who said they looked forward to going to the Independence Square to march. But the greater good of the children. And do we have the resources to spend so much money at the end of it all and all that? We have to look at it. We have to have a conversation. And that is the word that I want. We really have to have a conversation. We've reached the level that we have people who are knowledgeable, exposed enough to sit down and have a conversation and say, whither Ghana? Other than that, we're wasting our time. Because all these things I'm talking about, it's on me. I got friends who have even stronger views than I have on these things. And we have to have that narrative.
Corruption is a very major issue.
Very, very major issue.
Why is it difficult to eradicate that in Ghana?
I've interviewed quite a few people. And the thing is, the remuneration of Ghanaians. You pay somebody 2,000 cedis. He doesn't have a good place to stay. We don't have social housing. We don't have public transport. All right? Our utilities are off and on. All right? It creates a situation where there's a certain social and financial insecurity. So people want to do things to patch up that deficit. All right? So it opens ourselves up to to corruption. And people get into positions of incredible power where they realize, I can take decision and there'll be no, there'll be no reaction.
Yeah.
So I can go ahead and do it. So you steal $1 million. And then where do you take it to? You take it abroad, and then something happens to you, and that money is lost to Ghana. It doesn't make sense, but people will do it because they feel that this is it. So if we are going to stop corruption, we've got to enforce that when you're corrupt and you're caught, you should be jailed. And then we should have effective organizations. Look, I look at the OSP and I look at all those institutions. They are politicized. There should be effective technical organizations. Say, I don't care whether you're the Minister of Finance, I don't care whether you are, we'll arrest you. Because, and this is the evidence, and we won't play to the gallery. We'll make sure we gather the right kind of evidence to jail you. Look, the Secret Service in America, you know why it was founded? It's actually from the Treasury Department in America, because the Secret Service that guards the president was actually founded to ensure that there'll be no counterfeiting of American dollars. You've got to yeah. And the FBI went around organized crime because they weren't paying their taxes. You understand? Yeah. Yes, they were. If they caught you for murder, they had their way of doing it. But they realized that the ultimate aim of organized crime was to make illegal profits. So we catch you, and then we put you in jail for not paying taxes. Al Capone and Lucky Luciano and all those guys were jailed because of tax aberrations. So we have to have effective organizations that are not political, that do not come out and play to the gallery, that will do their work and catch people who are corrupt. But then there also has to be a social awareness program to make people aware. We have to have a moral code, codes of conduct and things like that, and they have to be actually enforced. All right? I can't say that I have an answer to all these things, but these things have got to be considered,
So on the issue of not politicizing these organizations, the OSP, EOCO, and all of that, how do we do that? Because these same politicians are those in charge. How do we do that?
That's a conversation that I think we should discuss another time. But I think that majority of Ghanaians are honest, and they want certain solutions. And I think that, as I talked, we have to have a conversation, come out with the effective narrative to do that.
Right. Okay. Now, Uncle Fred, what government reforms do you think we need to put in place to be able to get closer to Nkrumah's visions?
It's not getting closer to Nkrumah's vision. Nkrumah's vision will always be there, but we have to look at our constitution. They're doing a constitutional review.
Yeah.
We have to have a discussion on decentralization. I think Ghana should decentralize far more. Decisions shouldn't always come from the central government. We have to look at our districts, the management of our districts, the governance of our districts, and how to do it. And I can't just give out any answers to that. I just see that we've got to discuss it. If schools were under district management and the people in the area know and are close to the educational institutions, you'll see differences in the way things are made. I believe that we have to decentralize very, 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 very seriously.
But how do we also build a governance system that prioritizes national interest over political
It's in place. It's just the political will. It's in place. We need the political will to discuss. As I said, it's a narrative. You're going to have a national education, a national economic dialogue, and a whole group says we're not taking part. Then your conversation is in trouble. You have a national education dialogue, one group says, it's not necessary, so it won't take part. We have a problem.
And it comes back to the lack of focus you spoke about.
Yes. Focus, political will, and a need to do something for this great country of ours.
But how do we get out of this mess? And that's a question.
We've got all the institutions. We've got Parliament. We've got the judiciary. And now people are getting to realize that certain decisions that they're taking affects not only the people directly involved, but it affects the greater Ghana. And all these things have got to come in. As I said, for all that I'm saying, I said we need to sit down and have a narrative and say, where do we go from here? The houses of chiefs, the family groups, the district assemblies, the NGOs, and all that. Because we reach a certain stage where we need each other's input.
Right. We'll try and wrap up very, very soon. Maybe I have a few questions. What role should young people play when it comes to, the future of leadership in this country?
That's a question that I find very funny. The majority of Ghanaians are young people.
Young people, yeah.
So they've got to decide what they want to do and how they're going to do it. Yes, they'll need some help from people like us to say that, look, we did it this way, it didn't work, and all that kind of thing. But they have got to be interested in their country's future, and they have got to come together. And I'm seeing some very young people doing wonderful things in Ghana. And I hope that blossoms and becomes a bigger picture for them to do it. But I have a lot of hope in our young people. I really do.
So Uncle Fritz has a lot of hope in the young people of this country. 3 minutes to 10, and this is Business Breakfast on Z 101.9 FM. This morning we've been speaking to Uncle Fritz Bafo, who is a Ghanaian journalist, politician, and communications consultant. He was a member of Parliament for Ablik South constituency and the Minister for Information during the Mills administration. And this morning he's speaking extensively, taking us back in time, trying to let us understand things that we need to do as a nation. We're trying to wrap up the conversation, but if you have a comment, you're not too late to send it. We'll do well to read it on 0544321019, 0544321019 on WhatsApp, on Instagram, Facebook, and X at ZFFGH. Instagram, Facebook, and X at ZFMGH. Uncle Fritz, we're trying to wrap up.
Yeah.
Now, based on everything that we've discussed, what are 3 key things that you think Ghana must do now to stay on the true path of independence?
1, we must manage our resources far, far better. We should also be inclusive in managing our resources. We also have to have an inclusivity of our human resource base. All right. And then we should have a greater awareness of our nation in terms of heritage, in terms of what we have, and in terms of what we can do. We have to assess that and analyze that.
I want you to make a call to citizens generally in line with national development.
There's only one word: unity of purpose. We have to have a certain unity of purpose, a certain focus. Because if Ghana is peaceful, if Ghana has efficient organizations, if Ghana, the health of our people comes to the fore, people can move freely and efficiently, and people can actually involve themselves in entrepreneurial activity without problems, then I think our country is on its way. And we should also take our elected officials to task. We shouldn't let them go free if we feel that they're going wrong.
But the only way, in the past few years, the only way to do that is after 8 years.
No, I don't think so. I think we can continually do it. We are seeing people march to Parliament. We are seeing people come out with petitions and things like that. All those things are part of the process. One would argue that
it doesn't amount to much.
Well, then maybe it is the way they do it. You've got to do it in a certain way for it to be effective.
What
it's
way?
Been damn now. Well, you are a young man.
Uncle Fritz. No, but well, anyway, let me just move away from that. So that, yeah. But there's something you mentioned earlier about our two main political parties.
Yeah.
As one of the challenges that we face as a nation. what do we think we should be doing? What do you think we should be doing?
I've always believed in a multi-party system. And a multi-party system should not be a bipartisan system. It should be, at least if we have a very strong third force, it will help us. And then we also have to look at our electoral system. Have we ever considered proportional representation? I'm not saying that I support it 100%, but have we discussed it? You know, there are a lot of ways, there are a lot of solutions out there, and I think that we should investigate them.
We should investigate them. What practical recommendations would you give to the policymakers in this nation?
That's a tough question because who are the policymakers? How are they appointed? How do they get there? Are they competent? You know, do they understand their nation? Policymakers have got to understand Ghana in every aspect of the word. They've got to understand the heritage, the history. They've got to look at the geography. They've got to look at the external and the internal influences. You know, they've got to look at the social dynamics of this country. And I think that when you do that, then you know what you're talking about.
Right. Maybe my final question.
Go ahead.
Before we go, what mindset shift do we need as Ghanaians to be able to make real progress?
I mentioned it earlier. I said unity, sense of purpose. We've got to learn to work together. We've got to stop demonizing each other and start looking at how best we can work together. Because that's the only way we can do it. We can't, we're a developing nation. We haven't got time to be fighting each other. We're not a developed nation. We're a developing nation. And so we have to know that, you know, we're still struggling. And so if we want to struggle and end the struggle, then we've got to do it together. We can't do it apart from each other.
Wow. Because the major issue has been that this government comes, stays in power for 8 years.
4 years.
4 years, yeah. And then, but in most cases, 8 years.
Yeah,
but I mean, things are changing.
It could change.
Yeah, it could change. Well, that's true. So they stay for a while, putting certain policies, huge policies. Another government comes, they take out every one of them, or maybe change every one of them. Because
why should you allow it? You are the youth. And the thing is that you should also start asserting yourselves. You start making yourselves, make the politicians and the policymakers aware that you're a force to reckon with. And that's what we've got to do.
But for most of the young people, these politicians, they depend on these politicians.
That is what I'm saying. When you depend on people, you can't be independent.
You're right.
You've got to find ways of breaking away. You have to. You have to. You know, I sit down with a lot of the young people and I realize there are all kinds of problems. And those are the kind of problems I don't want to discuss on radio at the moment because I don't want to stir up controversies at the moment. All I'm saying is that let's look to ourselves and see how best we can work together to change this country.
Right. Uncle Fraze, as we wrap up, what would be your final message to Ghanaians as we reflect on 68 years of independence?
We've got a very long way to go. We're not there yet. So, as I said earlier, we have to work together. We've got to do things together. We've got to stop being suspicious of each other and have a common goal. I know it sounds very religious and moralistic, but it works. If we do it that way, we'll change this country for the better because we've got the makings of a wonderful and great country.
Uncle Fritz Baffour, thank you so much for today. Thank you.
Thank you too. Well, and congratulations to all the Ghanaians out there on the anniversary of our 68th Independence Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Uncle Fritz Baffour. He's a veteran journalist here in this nation. He's a politician and a communications consultant. And today, he's had a very fruitful conversation with us here on the Business Breakfast on Z.